Fatal Fury City of the Wolves was one of the most highly anticipated fighting games of 2025. As the sequel to the original Garo Mark of the Wolves game, this was a title 25 years in the making. As a competitor and commentator for SNK's flagship series, The King of Fighters, I was extremely excited to play COTW upon release. So I decided to give myself a month to grind out the game as much as possible to see where I would end up. So join me as I take you through what was my first month in Fatal Fury City of the Wolves. To track progress in any process, you need to first establish a baseline. An article from the Cambridge University Press and Assessment blog lists out the benefits of having a baseline assessment, highlighting that it provides feedback on a learner's starting point as well as helping someone in setting strategic and realistic goals for progress that will drive the learner's motivation. In the context of my COTW journey, I could gain an idea of how I performed to start out and then use that to determine next steps for what areas I could focus on for improvement. It would also prevent myself from setting unattainable goals that might demotivate me. Luckily, I had the perfect opportunity for such an assessment with a tournament happening the first week of the game at Maxmo 2025. Going into the event, I had no expectations for my performance outside of a goal of winning one set, which I thought was fair. I decided to lock in with B Jenny as my main because I had already played Rock Howard in KOF 15 and wanted to play someone with a different style. I played her some during the first beta and enjoyed the little bit of time I had with her. In terms of preparation, I did not have a lot of time to work with. I was scheduled to do commentary for the event, so much of my COTW time went towards studying for that rather than for, competing. I was also preparing to compete in Grand Blue as well as commentate for Guilty Gear Strive while also trying to promote the soundtrack I composed for the event. With all these things stretching my time thin as a rail, I still found time to get my feet wet in training mode and casuals the day before the event. When tournament day came, I quickly realized that I was not alone and still actively figuring things out. This game was new for everyone after all, not just me. With that in mind, I focused on utilizing very simple game plans and trusting in skills that I developed from playing other fighting games. My elementary game plan scored me a win in the first set at the bracket, and I was already thinking mission accomplished. So when my next match was against a world championship qualifier in FKang, I didn't really take it too hard when I lost 2-1. If anything, I was surprising myself by how much I was able to compete with my opponent. After dropping into losers, I won my next set, which meant that I would be going even regardless of what happened next. What happened next, however, was another win. Before I knew it, I looked at my next match and saw that it was a top 16 qualifier. And at this point, I thought, you know what? Why the hell not?
Well, yeah.
One more good sequence.
Just on SVG range, yeah.
Oh!
Once again, Jamaica just betting it all on the DG, and
I respect that. And there's a pop-off. That's what you like to see. That's what I like to see.
Yeah, it was pretty damn cool making top 16 in something I definitely thought I wasn't going to get out of pools in. Ultimately, my time in top 16 was short-lived as I finished at 13th because of some untimely errors in execution and lack of time with the game. However, my fundamentals carried me much further than I thought. I recognized that the game played at a slower pace than I expected from KOF. My ability to lean into that when it was called for in neutral, which I attribute to my Grand Blue experience, were the strengths that I could leverage. The dropped combos, missed punishes, and less than optimal offense were identified as areas to address going forward. I now had an idea of where I was starting out in my road to improvement, so it was time to get to work. To start things off in a simple way, my goals were to learn simple bread and butter combos that I could do consistently, practice how to anti-air, and just to play more to get comfortable moving around and expose myself to more of COTW. I fired up the combo trials to get an idea on some easy combos that I could work with and then hit the ranked streets to get some reps in with them. While I was working on those, I was also trying out different strategies for anti-airing. Ultimately, I started to use the high evade button to stop my opponents from jumping at me for free. I didn't want all my time to be in rank though, so I entered a couple of events happening that week. The first one was Paragon Line, an online bracket that had a ladder format, which meant that I could play as many sets as I wanted rather than having my night end after potentially going 0-2. I very much valued these extra sets because it meant that there were more chances for meaningful reps with what I was working on. I set a goal for myself to play 10 sets in the ladder, not so much focusing on winning, but rather practicing the key areas I was honing this week in those simple combos and anti-air. I ended up being able to play those 10 sets and finish with a record of 3-7. The record itself was not bad, all things considered, but like I said, I was more interested in tracking my progress during the event. The good things that I noted was that I hit many high evades for anti-airs to stop jump-ins from my opponents more often. Additionally, there was good consistency in executing the simple combos I would work on when I got the right touches. On the other hand, I noticed some other things that potentially required attention going forward. Even though I did anti-air a good bit, I saw myself freeze up a lot, especially in neutral, which would give my opponent free reign to start pressuring me. Under that pressure, I would panic and open myself up to big damage. For additional reps, I also went to my local venue where they were hosting a weekly tournament for City of the Wolves. To be expected, I found my takeaways from this offline event to be the same as the previous online one. I still ended up finishing third, which was, again, very surprising. All in all, it was a great start to the month. After spending the last several days throwing down in the playing grounds, I spent the beginning of the following week in the training room and watching replays. The focal points now were to learn how to play defense against close-up pressure as well as to take more initiative in neutral and on my offense. For the first point, I was aware of the different defensive tools available, such as the universal options in Rev Guard and Just Defend. There's also B Jenny's unique parry. I knew how strong these could be if utilized correctly, however the problem was that I was at a loss on how to take those tools and apply them within the context of a real match. To explore this, I went into the training room with my character against Hokutomaru, which was a character that I struggled against most in this area during the local. I went into this exercise seeing if there were concrete answers to the questions I posed a bit ago, but I quickly figured out that there was more to playing defense in this game than a one-size-fits-all approach. I'll show you what I mean with just one pressure sequence that Hoku players tend to do, which is close C into feint. This leaves Hoku at +1 on block, which means that he will be able to move one frame before I can if I block it. As such, I need to consider what he will do after the fact to respond accordingly. If he repeats close C in the feint, he must walk forward after 2 iterations of that sequence to keep repeating. However, if he micro walks in between the feints each time, then the push out doesn't occur at the same timing and he can keep going. I could parry after the feint or use a guard cancel after Just Defend on the next close C. I could also Rev Blow or Super. However, he could also choose to do a throw after the feint, which would beat the parry, Rev Blow, or Just Defend. Yet I could use Rev Guard to push him out to make it harder for him to run up to throw me, so I have the ability to push a button on his approach. However, he could wait to watch me whiff a button and then punish me for big damage with 2C. Again, I could parry if he goes for that 2C, but then that's leaving myself open to getting punished with a throw or just getting hit after the parry is done. This is not to mention that he could go for 2B or 2D to catch parry because it loses to low hitting moves. If I respect all of this and keep blocking, I'll eventually get guard broken after being put in overheat for blocking too long, and then that's another big combo. And that's all just for one sequence. The point I'm trying to make is that I had to change my mindset of looking for uniform answers since this game's offense can introduce many variables that I need to consider. So I focused less on trying to find a catch-all defensive option and more on being attentive to the patterns of my opponent with what characters can do in those moments. Going back to the Hokutomaru example, rather than thinking after close C into feint, I should always do X. I should notice that after the feint, my opponent likes to do Y, so I should respond to that pattern with the appropriate answer then. If they tend to go for another close C, I can parry or Rev Blow. Once they try to catch that by resetting in a throw, then I can change my answer to a hard call out by hitting them with a Hop D as the throw whiffs. So I'm able to play more of a chess game with my opponent rather than simply doing the same thing over and over again that will be punished for being predictable against players with good awareness. For some of you, this might sound obvious, but keep in mind that there are some fighting games that give players incredibly strong options that cover most of your opponent's offense. This realization meant that learning defense in COTW was going to be a more complex process that would probably take much longer than a month. While being more complicated, I found it also to be interesting and potentially fun to explore the breadth of how these interactions could occur. While I started to theory craft and test in the lab with certain sequences I recalled from the first week's games, I also took to the replay theater to see what other Jenny players were doing with the character, particularly how they were pushing their advantage in neutral and offense. I gathered a bunch of ideas for safe jumps, block strings, and even some more optimal combos. With my notebook filling up with ideas, I had no shortage of material for the week in training mode. It was a week of exploration and it felt like I was opening doors to new worlds of boundless improvement. If only it was that easy. My Fatal Fury experiment was now halfway done. 2 weeks down, 2 weeks to go. The first 2 weeks already showed so much promise, so I was very excited to see what I would do next. I'd gotten 13th at max mode, I got 3rd at the local, and I had discovered and practiced way more since then, so I started to get the idea that I should expect to begin winning now. That became my goal for the week, to win the local. Now, it's not inherently wrong to have a desire to win. After all, Herm Edwards had the famous quote of,
"You play to win the game."
However, what I didn't catch during this week was that I was headed towards a slippery slope. If you'll remember during the beginning, I discussed how managing goals and expectations was key to maintaining motivation in the learning process. Keep that in mind as I go through this week. Much of week 3 was spent playing in ranked so I could keep getting in as many games as possible. During these ranked sessions, however, I was focusing on doing what it took to rack up the wins. I wasn't necessarily honing any areas of deficiency, save for trying to use safe jumps and stronger combos. With this being my mentality, frustration started to creep in with every loss or wins that I didn't deem clean enough. Additionally, I began to burn myself out with the number of games and amount of studying I was committing to, which only added to the cocktail of negativity stirring in my mind while engaging with the game. When it came time for the local at the end of the week, I was dead set on performing well. After drilling it into my head that I needed to win, I didn't take a single game. Many dropped combos and missed timed safe jumps later. I was out at 0-2. To say I was disappointed in myself would be an understatement. I left the venue basically feeling like a failure. I didn't have notes for what I did well or what I needed to work on. All I knew was that I didn't even come close to my goal of winning, and in that moment, that's all that mattered. On the drive home, I was mulling over scrapping this video because it felt like it was a waste of time. Talking about improvement when all I had to show for 3 weeks was whatever the hell I did in that bracket. However, after using the weekend to take a break and take a step back, I remembered that the God I grew up getting dressed to talk to on Sundays was conveyed to be a very loving one. I also recalled that on the first day of 2001, a band from Nashville made it very clear that there's one group of people that God made an exception for. God hates a coward. Above all, I realized that last week's goal did not align with the learning pathway that I had laid out that was better suited for progress. I was focused on winning, not learning. Results are the byproduct of learning. If you skip a step to only look at the results, they will not come. Additionally, I was adding unneeded pressure on myself, which was resulting in frustration and decreased motivation. Epiphany in tow, I refocused my efforts back into the right places because the final week was here and I wanted to end this month the right way. I recalled the last local and identified strengths and weaknesses to hone in on. I liked that I was starting to formulate strategies for character matchups now that I was more familiar with the game. To the same effect, I was using that added familiarity to open the toolbox more with B Jenny and utilize more of her kit in different places. What I needed to work on this week was simple: sharper execution on combos and safe jumps. I asked some other players for advice on how to best practice those outside of a vacuum. They recommended that I practice the safe jump sequences and combos together for a training environment more similar to how events would play out in a real match. They also instructed to practice them on moving targets like the CPUs in arcade mode. I took that advice and played through the entirety of B Jenny's episodes of Southtown mode, doing nothing but drilling those safe jumps and combos together. With real humans, I ran long sets with the same objectives. I lost both sets, but I was more pleased that I was becoming more consistent with the combos and safe jumps like I had intended to do from the start of the week. As you can see, I was a much better student this week than in the one prior. I wanted to conclude this month with a final assessment to see how all of the last 4 weeks came together. That assessment would come in the form of the TNS bracket. Unlike the Paragon event, this online tournament was a standard double elimination format. However, if I went 0-2 or 1-2, I had the chance for added games in the Redemption bracket. Seeing as some of North America's strongest fighting game players line up for TNS regularly, I pretty much decided that I wouldn't be too hung up on not placing well. Unfortunately, that did indeed come to pass as I went 0-2 after a close set against Hokutomaru and a less close set against Marco. I made some mistakes that were pretty frustrating, but I didn't beat myself up too much over it this time around. After all, I had the chance to redeem myself and correct those mistakes in the Redemption bracket. I opened up the first set with a perfect game and following up with another near perfect marked with a bevy of successful safe jumps and anti-airs. The second game was a lot closer, but I still secured the 2-0 to advance. I did drop the first game of the next set, but then recovered despite messing up a few times. The important thing was that I kept my head in the game and played more around my opponent's habits in neutral and landing the combos just enough time to win the set with the opportunities I was able to get for myself. Winter semifinals was much of the same, with me dropping the first game and cleaning it up in the next one. Game 3 really came down to the wire, but I was able to clutch it out in the final round to get all the way to winners finals. At this point, I feel fantastic. I'm landing the combos and safe jumps that I've been working on, being attentive to what my opponents are doing and responding effectively to it, and I'm keeping confidence in my training to keep myself in the game even if I mess up. I could feel all of this month's practice being realized in real time. All of this comes together in a big way to result in a commanding 3-0 sweep in winners finals, and then another sweep to win a grand finals rematch to win it all. It's been a couple of months since this experiment ended, and reflecting on it all really gives me added perspective for what progress and learning really looks like. First of all, what you should take away from this is that progress ain't pretty. It's not linear, and it doesn't look the same for everyone. I talked about the moments of frustration where I wasn't improving at the rate I wanted or winning as much as I thought I should have, and that'll happen. How I ended up combating that, which is another thing I want people to pick up on, is that you need to formulate a plan that's right for you, make the right adjustments as you go, and then continue to trust in both the process and yourself. Once I recentered myself and prioritized the right things, I was able to rebound from the frustration and make great strides after a setback. I didn't make this video to impress anybody with becoming a high-level player in just 4 weeks. I did this because I wanted to really learn, document, and showcase to y'all what the learning process is like. I hope it gives other players ideas on how they can go about learning this game and other games. You can even apply some of these takeaways to other pursuits that you're working on. I know I use lessons learned through fighting games for music and a variety of other things. I also want this to encourage and inspire people to go out and learn things. It's an extremely rewarding experience, and you might surprise yourself with what you're capable of. I mean, I didn't foresee myself winning a redemption bracket at the end of this, so anything's possible if you just give it a try. This video was so much fun to make, and I'm glad that I did it. It was the most amount of scripting, editing, and all that jazz to go into a video, so I hope y'all enjoyed it and got something out of it. If you've made it this far, thank you so much, first of all. Second, please consider leaving a like and a subscribe because it helps the channel out so much, and it will help me make more videos like these as well as the music that you hear in it. Until next time though, I've been Zamir Stills, aka Zoma, and I hope y'all have a great day. Thank y'all so much for watching.